it's just as constant as change. It's like they're partners in this. So if you can accept that every day is going to involve pain, that every project you want to undertake, that every interaction with your spouse, with your kid, with your boss, things like they're all going to have some sort of level of pain. And if you kind of accept that going into it, it's something that can make it maybe a little more easier, I should say, and turn the temperature down on the change in pain scale. Hey everyone, welcome to the first edition of the Thursday 13, as we're calling it right now, here at the Happily Different podcast. This is a new feature of our podcast where we will be spending some time on a topic I've either been thinking about, I've been chewing on, a topic I'd love to chat about with you guys. Sometimes we'll have an expert in the room or on the podcast to give their 2 cents on a specific topic, and it's just meant to be an easily digestible thing that we can share with you guys, and hopefully bring some value in addition to our long form episodes, which will still come out every other Tuesday. These will be every other Thursday, and like I said, we're going to try to keep it to under 13 minutes. So it's 13 minutes or less. I got my eye on the clock here on my first one, so bear with me as we jump into this new endeavor here. So I've been doing some writing. I do a lot of writing for our blog, and one of the topics I've been wrestling with lately is the idea of accepting change with grace. I think we all know that change is the only constant in life. If you don't know that, welcome to Earth. It takes a lot of time for us to learn that, I think, in life, and it's a constant thing we're learning. It's not something that comes automatically to us. So change is the only constant in life. How we interact with that change generally dictates our well-being. So do you push against that change? Do you try to bend it to your will? Generally speaking, if that's the case, and you're like me, who's done that for many years, it feels like your well-being is not as positive as it could be. Or do you flow with that change? Do you float with it? Do you accept it? Do you work with it to make it a positive outcome? And generally speaking, your well-being becomes more positive in that case. And like I said before, I've studied mindfulness for many years, and you'd think sitting cross-legged for as many years as I have, I'd have it all figured out. But I continue to try to bend life to my will. I try to assume that my plan is the way things are going to go, and I bet you guys can imagine how that all works out. So one of the things, like I said, I've been wrestling with is how do I accept change with grace? And I did a little writing on that and tried to figure out if I could distill it down to when I'm at my best, when I'm working with change in the most positive manner, what does that look like for me? So it could be different for many people, both positive and negative. But for me, these seem to be the two items that support me working with change. And the first one is presence. So getting back to the mindfulness topic, we've all been told we need to be more present in our lives. We need to stop looking forward necessarily and stop looking backwards. But what I'm talking about is being present in that moment of change and recognizing that change is happening. And that's hard to do. So mindfulness is a good tool for that, for training those things. But even all the mindfulness in the world, in that moment, you have to recognize that change is happening and how you're going to work with that. So one of the ways I do that is trying to see to the end of things. And what I mean by that is a lot of people, myself included, we see the start of something. We see the middle of something, but very rarely do we see it through to its finish. That whatever that change is or whatever that pain is, we see it start, we feel it in the middle, but we don't sit around long enough to actually think about, that change ended and now something new has started, or that pain ended and now I no longer feel that pain. And it's a little bit of a distinction, but it's something that I think is key when we can see the start, the middle, and the end of something, and see that life is just that circle that keeps going like that: start, middle, end, restart. And it's been helpful for me to look at the start of something, the middle, and say, okay, there's the end of it. Cool. Now this new thing starts for me. So my encouragement there on being present is seeing your way to the end of things. Next, and some people might not like this, is you just got to feel all the feels. So part of being present is sitting with that pain, sitting with that change. And I keep saying pain. I should back up a little bit, but a lot of times change feels like pain, and that's why we're afraid of it. Some change is really positive and doesn't feel painful at all. But 9 times out of 10, that change is going against what you're used to. And so on some level, even if it's a positive thing, there is some negative feeling towards it. So my encouragement is to feel all the feels, feel it really painful, recognize it. And what that allows you to do is sit in that moment and say, okay, this isn't that bad. But unless you're present with that and actually recognizing it and saying, all right, this is painful, but it's not killing me. It's just a low level of stress that doesn't allow you to accept that change, and you feel like you need to grind against it. So don't be afraid to get in touch with your inner feelings and feel all the feels while you're working through that change. Next is, and this is a technique I like to do, is when I have some sort of change or some sort of adaptation I need to make, or some sort of project I'm getting into that's really going to change my life, I like to get either really big or really small. And so generally speaking, I go for the really big, which is if you've ever been to the Grand Canyon, or you've ever been to on top of a mountain ridge, and looked over the beautiful valley, or looked over the Grand Canyon, or looked at the stars on a beautiful starry night somewhere where you can see the stars, you feel infinitesimally small. If you give yourself a moment to be present, you go, wow, I am such a tiny little speck in this whole thing we call life and this whole thing we call human history. I'm such a tiny speck that whatever I think is so important really isn't that important. It could be important to you now, but when you step back and look at the grand scheme of things, you realize, wow, this is just a tiny little blip in history that no one would even recognize. It's a nanosecond of history. And that doesn't change the fact that you do feel that pain and you do feel that change. But by putting it into perspective, it allows you to kind of maybe move forward with it a little bit. Also, getting really big, one way to do that is to kind of look at the timeline of your life too. So not just human history, but the timeline of your life, and look back and see some of the challenges you've gone through, some of the changes you've gone through, and what it led to today. So if you can step back and see the longer time horizon, you can realize that the thing you're going through right now is probably going to end up as a positive thing. If we all look back on our life, generally speaking, a lot of the hard changes and pain we look back on, we couldn't be where we are without them. So get really big. The other way I like to do it is get really small, sort of not in the middle, big or small. It's trying to take a challenge, let's use it in the form of a challenge, but taking a challenge and breaking it down into the tiniest little pieces I can, and biting one piece at a time and one little bit, and building momentum, and slowly. You got to be diligent about that, because it's hard to tell if you're doing anything really. But bit by bit, you take a bite off, and then you get to the end of the line and your project is done, or the change you were trying to make is done. There's a reason there's that saying, you can't eat the elephant in one bite. I've never met anybody who's eaten an elephant, but if you did eat an elephant, you certainly couldn't eat in one bite. So get really big or really small. And then finally, last on presence, accepting that pain is a part of life. We talked about change being a constant, but so is pain. You're always going to feel some gradation of pain as you go through life. It's just as constant as change. It's like they're partners in this. So if you can accept that every day is going to involve pain, that every project you want to undertake, that every interaction with your spouse, with your kid, with your boss, things like that, they're all going to have some sort of level of pain. And if you kind of accept that going into it, it's something that can make it maybe a little more easier, I should say, and turn the temperature down on the change in pain scale. All right, that's presence. Number 2 is adaptability. So what do I mean by adaptability? I mean being flexible in the moment. So my idea of being flexible is I'm a big runner, right? And so I'm very tight, and my muscles can be rigid and stiff. And if I try to do anything other than running, moving laterally or anything like that, everything is sore and hurts, right? That's not a real great place to be. But as I make my muscles more flexible, as I make my body more flexible, I'm able to adapt and do different things with my body that I couldn't before. And the same goes for life and interacting with the world, and being flexible and and putting yourself in situations that do challenge you so that you can be adaptable along the way. And one of the things that mindfulness does really well is it helps you to create pauses throughout your life. And so one of the tips for adaptability is responding versus reacting. And for me, what that means is the moment of pause is the main difference. So responding versus reacting, all that's different is a moment of pause. Reacting is letting your mind and body take control, your initial impulses to take control. Responding is taking a sliver, a nanosecond pause to say, okay, how do I want to respond to this instead of what does my mind and body want to do? So the next time your spouse is frustrated with you, the next time your boss gives you a bad review, the next time something doesn't go your way, you have a chance to pause just for a moment and say, how do I want to respond to that? And that builds on itself. And the more you can lengthen that pause, the better off your response will be versus reacting. And then another one is we've all seen great movies, right? And the greatest movies have plot twists. And the most boring movies move in a linear fashion where you know how it's gonna play out. Same thing is with our lives, right? We think that it's this movie that's just gonna keep going, and here's my plan, and this thing's gonna happen, and this thing's gonna happen. I'm gonna get married, and I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna start a company. I'm gonna sell it for a lot of money, and I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna do that. And it never works out that way. It's all jagged and all over the place, and turns this way and goes back the other way. And those are the plot twists. So you got to learn to roll with those plot twists, because the best movies are riveting because of those plot twists, and the best lives are riveting because of those plot twists as well. So in conclusion, with less than a minute here, accepting change with grace takes effort. It's a bit of a counterintuitive approach towards accepting that change is accepting the pain and accepting that this is a part of your life. Society and life has convinced us that we need to grind life down to get what we want. And I just think there's another way. So just embrace that dance with change. And I appreciate you listening to the Thursday 13. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.